All right, good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see you. As we now have quorum, thanks for being on time. I'd like to call the October meeting of the Rhode Island Opioid Settlement Committee meeting to order. And I'd like to welcome in particular members of the public. Thank you for joining us both in person and via Zoom as well. So we have a lot to get through. I'd like to move us right along. So if you could forward the slide whenever you're ready. And I'd like to start by asking the committee members to introduce themselves, and then we will get a motion to approve the minutes. Why don't we start over here with Phil?
Phil Chan, Rhode Island Department of Health. Rich Leclerc, Director of BHDDH.
Jeffrey Verone, Fire Chief of the Town of West Warwick, and I'm the Kent County Representative.
Raphael, Designee Speaker's Office.
Alex McAdoo, Brownsville Public Health.
Rachel Ferrara, City of Providence.
Maria Santos, Providence County Representative.
Katie Hansen, Head of Substance Use Treatment Services, Thrive Behavioral Health.
Good afternoon, I'm Julie Hale, I'm the State Court Administrator, and I serve as the Chief Justice's Designee.
Good afternoon, Jake Bazillion, on behalf of Senate President Lawson, Designee of the Senate.
Hi, everybody. Julia Harvey from the Office of the Attorney General.
Sean Lacey, Town Manager, Wesley, Representative, Washington County.
Thank you all. We'll now move to our state officials. Michelle?
Hi, Michelle Gonzalo, Finance Manager at OHHS.
Kathleen Schultz, Director of the Governor's Overdose Task Force and also the overdose work at AOHHS.
And my name is Brandon Marshall. I have the pleasure of serving as chair of the Rhode Island Opioid Settlement Committee, and I'm also a professor of epidemiology at the Brown University School of Public Health. All right, so we'll start by getting a motion to approve the minutes. Right before the meeting, there was one correction that we'd like to make to the minutes, which is a vote. Director Leclerc was an affirmative vote on last month's approval, and Samantha Vienda was not present for the meeting. So that doesn't change the overall tally of 10 votes in favor and 5 votes opposed, but we just wanted to make that change for the record. So following that change, if there are no other changes, I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the August minutes.
So moved.
And second?
Second.
McAdoo, great. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That
Brandon,
motion passed. Oh, yeah.
Should I abstain because I was not present, although Adi was present last time?
I think as the representative, you can.
Excellent.
Full voting, yes.
Then aye.
Okay, thank you. Great. That motion passes. Okay, so let's go to today's agenda. If you would forward the slide deck still. So as you can see, we have a lot of business to get through today, and I'd also like to make sure we have sufficient time for public comment. We have 2 opportunities for public comment after the discussion of supplementation and then before the close of the meeting. So for members of the public, you'll have 2 opportunities there. And we will also have a vote on supplementation guidance today as well. We've had a small change to the agenda. We've just shifted the order of the presentation from the Attorney General's office on the Purdue settlement with Regina Labella's presentation. She'll be joining us at 2:15 for her presentation, number 7 there. So that is why we made that switch. Okay, so first up, we'll turn it over to Kathy, who will walk us through an update on the recommendations for fiscal year 2027, which we voted on and recommended at the August 27th meeting. So take it away, Kathy.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. So you should have received an email last night with the memo from the Secretary approving the FY27 recommendations from the Opioid Settlement Committee. Everybody received it? I'm
Nope.
Director Leclerc?
Nope.
You were on the invite. I'll double check and see why that would have happened. Okay.
Glad to hear the news, though. Thank you.
Yes. We sent that out yesterday. So we are just, you can move to the next slide. So this is just what you saw last month. We just changed the word to approved. So these are the percentages that were voted on and approved for FY27. So the next piece of the process, just so everybody is aware, especially for those of you who are newer, what we will do is we will take those percentages based on the $10 million that's available for revenue, and we will go back to the state agencies once again. So we were informed by the state agencies. We're going to go back to the state agencies, and we will double check with them and kind of pull out the line items and create a budget, which is due in December. Correct, Michelle?
That's correct.
So that's basically kind of what the process is. Again, for those of you who are newer, this is the typical process that we follow, and then it goes back to the state agencies to really look at those line items and put that into a budget. That will be shared with the General Assembly in our December report, as well as with this committee.
If there's no questions, we'll have time. We can always come back to this as well. But we can move us to supplementation to have lots of time for that discussion, public comment, and vote. But if you do have questions about this process, we can address those a little bit later. So I'll move us along to supplementation then. So as a reminder, this was a topic that came up at one of our summer meetings, first raised by an expert presentation we had from Kristen Pendergrass, who is at the Shatterproof Foundation and a national expert on opioid settlements. And she, during her presentation, had brought up this issue and recommended we have a look at the Colorado guidance as an exemplar for a state that has issued guidance around supplementation. So if you go to the next slide, so this is the definition that the Colorado version of this committee did issue and has as its formal approved guidance. So I'll just read out that definition and then walk through some examples and then open it up for discussion with the intent of voting on similar guidance today. The draft guidance in full for the committee members is available in your packet as a printout here, and it was circulated last night via email as well, correct, Kathy? Yeah, this went out via email as well. Okay, so the Colorado Opioid Abatement Council defines supplementation in the context of opioid settlement funds as the deliberate replacement or reduction of existing federal, state, or locally allocated funds with opioid settlement funds. These funds are to be used to create, maintain, or expand program activities. Opioid settlement funds are not to be used to replace or reduce existing federal, state, or local funds that have already been appropriated or allocated for the same purpose. So what we have done is the UHHS staff has prepared guidance that is adapted actually from the Colorado guidance. We kept the same definition of supplementation and then made some small changes to the guidance, which you can read through in your packet. If you go to the next slide, one thing that we have done is include some examples of what supplementation is to give it a little bit more clarity for yourself and for members of the public in this decision making. So in the guidance, you'll see some examples of what supplementation would be. These examples would be things like replacing existing funding streams and then making additional investments or basically replacing those funding streams with opioid settlement dollars. So, you know, an example of this would be, say, taking funds away from some program, say an opioid overdose response program that had been previously funded, replacing it with opioid settlement dollars, and then taking that funding and moving it over to support another program, say an animal shelter, for example. The second example would be purposely reducing local or state funding because of an expectation that opioid settlement funds can be used. So an example of that would be purposely, say, reducing a budget for a behavioral health program and then using opioid settlement dollars to top it back up to maintain it. And a final example would be backfilling cuts. So basically, if there was a planned cut to an existing program, using opioid settlement funds to restore funding to the prior level would be another example of supplementation. Go to the next slide. So I think it's also helpful to explain what supplementation is not, and this is in the guidance as well, I think, on the last page. So the first example of what non-supplementation is would be using those funds to support programs that are at risk of termination because a funding stream is going away entirely. And that's kind of, I think, where the nuance and challenge comes from the prior slide. In my mind, supplementation is all about like a swap, right? Taking one funds and swapping it out. This here is not a swap. It's basically continuing a program that would be discontinued because of expiration of that funding stream. And of course, what we want ideally are opioid settlement funds to expand existing programs or to invest in new infrastructure enhancements or new programs that abate the opioid crisis in Rhode Island. So that could be new programs, that could be expansion of existing programs to increase the reach or impact of these programs. So those would all be examples of non-supplementation. So go to the next slide, Sil. So this is a summary of the proposed policy, and I'll open it up for discussion in a moment. We'll then move to public comment, and then I'd like us to vote on this guidance. The proposed policy states that the Rhode Island Opioid Settlement Advisory Committee supports the use of funds to create, maintain, expand, or enhance effective programming that addresses the state's overdose crisis. The committee does not endorse supplementation as an approved purpose, which is defined as the deliberate replacement of or reduction in existing federal or state resources with opioid settlement funds. So that's a summary of the proposed policy. Right before I open it up for discussion, I've got one more slide, I think, so, which is just my understanding of why I think we need this guidance. I did some deep dives on this before the meeting and found a guidance document from the Network of Public Health Law. They noted that we are one of 6 states that in the legal settlement agreement, it states that the funds should be used for forward-looking purposes. That's the term in the legal agreement, which this organization feels is not specific enough and recommends that bodies such as these committees offer more specific guidance on restricting funds for supplementation. So that's why I'm bringing this to the committee today, is really because of that recommendation, that the language in our agreement is not clear enough vis-a-vis this particular issue. And that's an issue in 5 other states as well. And so finally, to be clear, this would not change in any way the existing terminology in the agreements. It would be an additional guidance, kind of like how this committee has voted on the guidance around equity, right? So it would sit as a separate guidance that UHHS staff would then adhere to. So that is my thought in terms of why we need the guidance. I'd love to open it up for discussion now. We'll go to public comment and then move along to a vote. So the floor is open for any comments, questions, concerns, thoughts. Yes, Director Leclerc.
More a comment. I'm supportive of the policy as drafted, but I'm thinking of the implications for it, since it not only governs our decision, but it governs the decisions of the recipient of these funds. Mm-hmm. Should there be in contractual arrangements that disperse these funds the requirement that from the recipient that they will not be supplemented by the decrease of the maintenance of effort on their end? Otherwise,
that's my understanding.
I'm not sure how we enforce it.
Right. That this would be essentially monitored in the contracts. I'm not sure, Michelle, if that makes sense from your perspective, or Kathy, that the guidance.
We would have to probably talk to DOA about that.
Okay.
If it has something to do with procurement or contracts, we'd probably have to talk to DOA about that end of it. For the purposes of this is about really just making sure when we're thinking about, for this body's role, is what we just kind of went over, is looking at the pillars by percentage, so that we are saying that if there was a request across the pillars for the recommendations for the fiscal year within the budget, that this committee would be saying that as long as it isn't to supplement or supplementation, if I'm saying the right word. For the contractual question, that would be a DOA question. I would think internally with the state, as far as contracts, if you're talking about that language being in the contract for our partners and vendors, that would be a DOA.
So that might be a next step then, Kathy. Say if this guidance was approved, it goes to DOA to determine whether similar language could actually be written into contracts, perhaps. Does that make sense, Director? Yeah.
Because my point is, if we allocate by pillars, it may be hard to determine where supplementation could or might occur after that has been allocated to the pillars, so that the implementation of new and additional services doesn't get to be implemented because there's been some retraction of funds by the contractor, by this municipality, by the organization, whatever it is. So to really follow through with making sure that the dollars go where they're supposed to go and not get supplanted or replaced by something else, then I think that would be a logical follow-up to it. And it is contractual, I know, and it's DOA, but each department, obviously has their own contracts with vendors. And I don't know if that's a logical step that we would want to at least recommend.
Yeah.
We could recommend that as a body, but that would still be within the state agencies and the Department of Administration.
Yes.
So I think that would be a conversation between the state agencies on how they would actually operationalize this, and that would be a policy within the state. So we could have a conversation when we meet on a regular basis. We'll also talk to the division directors of the agencies.
Dr. Chan?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Marshall. I think the Rhode Island Department of Health is generally supportive of this. I wanted to highlight and clarify one point that you made. The point is that, this body issues advisory recommendations. So this would be an advising statement that then EOHS would agree to follow.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right. That's my understanding. Is that yes?
And BHDDH and the Department of Health and
And
all of the agencies that are getting any of the opioid settlement funds, including our MOU'd agencies such as the Executive Office of Housing, the Department of Corrections. So anybody that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
So thank you for this materials. I assume from your comments that nothing in the settlement documents talk about supplementation. And so it's just, this is where we're being asked to be more particular.
That's right.
The guidance that you did submit indicated that there's an exhibit which identifies approved purposes.
Yes. So
is that, can we glean anything from that in terms, is it just kind of topical in terms of like prevention, treatment? I'm sure I've seen the document, but it's not coming to mind at the moment.
So I can tell you, that's a great point, because that's how we could sort of help to operationalize this, similar to the equity statement or the equity operationalization of equity. At EOHS, in our contracts, in any of the contracts, we always actually put that as language. So what we do is we put language around structural racism, class, in each of our contracts, as well as we put the allowable uses. So if this body wants to recommend to the state agencies that they all practice that, that might be helpful too, because that kind of holds the vendor to the point of Director LeClaire, that holds the vendor sort of responsible. But again, to make it as a state policy, it's a recommendation, it's an advisory, like Dr. Chan had mentioned. So we can put these recommendations and these suggestions, and then it's about operationalizing that on a state agency level.
Right. I mean, the other thing I would say, like just from a legal perspective, which I've got my lawyer hat on, to reference the settlement document somehow in this policy would probably be a good idea.
Yep.
Even if it's not specific, it at least gives people pause to say, okay, oh, wait a minute, and the way this body is interpreting future use is that it prohibits supplantation. I think that's fair. So I think that that's kind of a way to tie in the settlement and the legal framework with what we're doing as an advisory body.
Yeah, that makes sense, Julie. So that would be a modification to explicitly reference the settlement agreement.
And the future, whatever that language is, the future use, and that we view that as prohibiting the supplantation of federal or state dollars with opioid dollars.
Yeah. And just to clarify, yes, the agreement does have an exhibit which lists all of what are called the allowable uses. which are programs that focus on opioid abatement. So that's sort of the general framework. There's more detail, but generally it's programs that, are reaching people who have opioid use disorder or who are at risk for opioid overdose is the language that is written in the agreement.
Okay.
Yeah. So that would not change, obviously. Right. But I agree with you, referencing that agreement in this guidance would be helpful.
Yeah, I thank you for that.
Yeah.
We'll definitely.
Julia, and then Dr. McAdoo.
In the same vein, and this is actually a question that perhaps I should know the answer to because this is often what I do, but there's sort of two categories of agreements. There's a settlement agreements, and then there's the memorandum of understanding between the state and the cities of towns. Is the future uses language in the MOU or in I think it might be in the MOU, and I just offer that as a point of clarification for when we make any amendment tying those things out. Great.
Dr. McAdoo.
Yeah, my comment is sort of jumping off of both Julie and Julia's comments. Is wondering if this guidance will undergo any additional legal review to ensure that its application and interpretation going into the future will indeed be what we're intending for it to be today as we're interpreting it.
Good question. We had not discussed that. And that is maybe why we had thought about keeping it at the level of guidance, like the equity guidance. So it would have no legal bearing. It would not legally affect the legal documents, which are the agreement and the MOU. So that's currently, but if the committee feels like we should pass this through either lawyers at UHHS or the Attorney General's office, we could do that and pause a vote until January would be one option.
And maybe just in response to that, one thing that we could consider doing is just saying that this statement in no way is intended to conflict with any of the obligations set out in the settlement agreements or the memorandum of understanding, just so there's no confusion.
And it has to follow the Department of Administration's purchasing rules and stuff like that. Because I think that, or maybe put in some language just to call that out so that there's no confusion that this isn't at a contract level. I don't know if I'm explaining it correctly.
I have less insight into the DOA piece of this, but.
Yeah.
And can I just build off that? So when I was, as I've been thinking about this, I've really thought about this at the department level, the agency level, state budgets. In regard to like the community organizations that get the funding, that is all budgeted out and the awards are given for specific scopes of work.
Exactly.
And I guess one thing, just to clarify, if folks have any opinions on it, but it's common, I think, for community-based organizations for things to change, or for, let's say, as an example, you write in your budget for OSAC money for, 1,000 naloxone kits, but wait a second, the second pot of money comes through and now you're getting naloxone kits for free.
Right.
And therefore, normally what happens is the community-based organization will go back to UHHS and say, we have this $100,000 award, we no longer need to cover naloxone, we're proposing to cover XYZ instead. So I think we should just be clear what this applies to, because a situation like that sort of seems to fall in this definition, but I think that would be okay.
So I think that goes back to what I was saying, is that this, and Brandon, please chime in, is that this is guidance that we did with the equity statement. In the equity statement for the contracts that I have my hands in, and many of the contracts across the state agencies, we give that language to those contracts and say, we need to put this in. But you have to operationalize it by putting metrics that are actually measuring equity. That's just an example. And it's sort of the same thing with this, is that this is guidance for you all to make decisions when we're thinking about the allocations for the pillars. And it also is guidance to the state agencies to say that we want, when we do make these allocations, it's with an understanding that we're allowable use is very important, right? That we are making sure that it's within allowable uses. The settlement agreement or the MOU already says that, but we're just adding a little layer to that. But from a legal or policy perspective, we can't change the Department of Administration's purchasing rules. So that would give that flexibility for the agency as a state agency who is procuring these and has an evaluation process in order for any RFP or any kind of funding that they're doing, as well as a partnership with our vendors, that they are going to the agency and if they're changing any of those line items. So I think it's like bringing this out one level where we're not getting into the details of the contract. But as agencies, we'll work together and say, we want to at least have this language in there when we're making considerations of requests for funding across the agencies. Does that make sense?
Correct. So I think my thought was that this should probably not apply to the vendors. This applies to EOHHS and the state agencies and everything, but it's EOHHS's role or DOA to ensure that organization A is not applying for funding and then going to move, and it's already funded to do through another source, and then going to move all that funding to do something else and use this money to do that.
I can't
Does that make
speak
sense?
for DOA though. So I don't, you know what I mean? That's where the purchasing stuff and the legal stuff.
Well, I assume that what this is meant to do is a statement to the agency. So when you're building your budget,
Yes.
you know, don't assume that the $10 million that is going to flow through your organization from settlement funds, that you can now take 10 million that would have been in that and put it somewhere else. So like, I think this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the sense I have is that this is like a top layer, you know, this is how we view opioid settlement funds use. So not to get into the weeds with like how individuals may need to change buckets, so to speak, but I would hope that that's how it's intended to come across and how it will be received, you know.
That's the same, I use the equity statement because that's operationalized now, is when we do an RFP, or when EOH just provides guidance to state agencies, we say, here's the language that should be in the RFP, starting at the RFP, because that is centering equity, right? And then when we develop those contracts, I can speak for EOH just when I put the contracts in, we actually have we try to always have an equity measure in there for performance because that was what we based our evaluation of that RFP on. So it's kind of like the same idea. I think that's to what you were saying, Julie.
So Kathy, to clarify, it would largely be up to the agencies to actually like operationalize this guidance. We wouldn't dictate exactly how that's done. Yes.
Yeah, but if it's put into place, it's our role at EOHHS as the staffing of the opioid settlement committee to honor the decisions and the votes that you make.
Yeah.
And that is to work with the agencies to just be the coordinator, to remind the agencies that this has been operationalized, this has been voted on, just as we do with the equity part of it.
Other questions, clarifications? Yeah.
I'll also note briefly that, you know, given that this is more, this guidance for our internal body, very similar to the equity guidance, I feel comfortable then thus proceeding forward with a vote today without pursuing additional, I guess, legal review.
Okay, great. My thought was to open up for public comment and then get back to a discussion about whether or not to vote today, but thank you for sharing that perspective, Alex. I'll let the committee members have one last opportunity for discussion or questions. Great. Okay, so I'll go now to public comment. We typically start with members who are joining us in person and then go to Zoom. We might have a lot of comments today, so I'll ask you to keep your comments to 2 to 3 minutes. I do not have my phone on me at the time. Thank you, Sil. If you're willing to do that, I can grab it. So I see one hand raised. Sandy, thanks for joining. The floor is yours, and then we'll go to other members. Thank you for joining.
Everybody. I'm Sandy Valentine. I'm a person in long-term recovery and the executive director of Ride Cares. It's interesting that this is the topic because when we came today, there's a few of us from Ride Cares, and Ride Cares has started a recovery advocacy work group that is filled with people in recovery and people working in the recovery workforce. And first I want to say thank you because we sent this committee a letter and received a very thoughtful, quick response back from Dr. Marshall on your behalf that our concerns that OSAC money could be diverted to solve for financial crises in other parts of the state of Rhode Island system. We do feel heard, but I do think that given this conversation, there may be an opportunity to be a little bit more expansive in the wording that you're considering so that it does encompass financial crises that are under the governor's authority in some way, right? That's for all the attorneys and all of you at the table that have that. But I would like to read a bit of a prepared statement. Usually I speak off the cuff, but I'm not just representing me. So I do just want to share that on behalf of our Recovery Advocacy Work Group and some of the other fellow organizations that have signed on to that original letter you received, the opioid settlement dollars were secured to address the harms caused by the overdose crisis and to invest in solutions that save lives. They were meant to repair harm, save lives, strengthen recovery, and not to bail out bankrupt hospitals and take away critical resources. To do that would be betraying the intent of the settlement and the trust of the communities we serve. So we're really asking the committee to protect these dollars for what they're meant for, and I see that. I see that in the slides you've shown today. I know that that is your intention, and I appreciate all that you're doing to continue that. But we want to make sure that we keep them where they belong, and there's a lot of concern right now because we haven't gotten a direct answer from the governor's office to make sure that we're not bailing out broken systems and that the people of Rhode Island really do deserve that clarity around these funds, not just from you, but also from our state leadership. I do believe that this particular conversation could have, it's ancillary, right? But it's in the spirit of what we're asking for. So just ask maybe, is there some way to invest in that wording to avoid the financial crisis type of things that's under the governor's authority? And again, thank you all for everything that you do.
Thank you, Sandy. Yes. How's it going? The floor is yours.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thanks.
Laurie McDougall. I just want to thank you. I'm glad we're talking about this topic today. And it does seem as if this topic kind of got brought forward maybe because of some of the hospital issues. And I want to say that actually I don't feel as heard as Sandy does. And I feel as if some of the funding was going to be diverted in a way that was not transparent. And I feel that I did step forward to at the rally to stand up and say, hey, do not divert the settlement funds. I did it quietly, I did it respectfully, and I felt very shut down. Which is why I'm here today to kind of voice that this particular funding has been historically underfunded in a huge way. And when we finally have funding or a reasonable source of funding, I don't want to see it diverted away from what it really is intended to be used for. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Lori. Thanks for joining today. Other comments from members of the public? We can go to Zoom.
Just some thank yous to ride cares. I don't see anybody with public comment. If anybody on Zoom, on Teams would like to speak, just raise your hand or come off mute.
Okay, great. Yes, Dr. Shan, let's go back to, if there's no more members of the comments or members of the public, we can turn back to the committee.
We do have a hand up. I'm
sorry.
Great,
okay.
Sorry about that. Sarah?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes. Hi, Sarah.
Hi everyone. Thank you so much, Lori and Sandy, for speaking on that. I just wanted to add into addition to both Sandy and Lori's comments. Do we have an answer, or are their comments going to be directly addressed in this meeting today, or has there been any word from the governor's office that can kind of quell those fears? Any definitive statement that has been made around this? I know OSAC has made a comment, and you all are dedicated to ensuring the integrity of these funds, but I'm just wondering, there's still fear unless something is kind of put in writing from the governor's office that things can happen. So just curious if there's a finality in that statement.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. I can address that, and also Kathy as well. You might have missed at the beginning of the meeting, Kathy provided an update. We did get a formal memo in writing from the Secretary of EOHHS approving the committee's recommendations from August with no changes to the percentages or the allocations, which was great news. So that is in writing. The letter was circulated to the committee. And I think it can be made public, correct, Kathy? Does that memo go on the website as well, or could?
Yes.
Yeah. So we can put that letter and make that available publicly, Sarah. But to answer your question, yes, we did receive in writing that the allocations that the committee reviewed and approved in August were approved with no changes. Anything you'd like to add, Kathy?
I don't know if Dr. Chan, you wanted to.
Yeah, so first off, I wanted to thank Sandy and Lori and Sarah for bringing this up. So on behalf of the Health Department, and I also spoke to Anna Novice right before this meeting, and I would say probably on behalf of EOHHS, is that we are absolutely committed that these funds go to where they're supposed to. And I think all of us sitting around this table are really invested in this topic and committed. I think that's clear. I will acknowledge that there were some very high-level conversations, higher than anyone in this room, asking questions about these funds. And I think it's been made clear that the OSAC committee, that we want to be transparent about these funds, which I feel very strongly about. There were some questions asked about the use of these funds. And at this point, those conversations are no longer moving forward, which is on good authority from others in leadership. I do want to be careful about suppressing questions and comments. So I think that there's not, I think that we in this community and this room are very clear about what these funds should be used for. There's some of us that show up at almost all these meetings. But I think it's reasonable in this time of crises, and certainly in these times of public health crises, that people can approach us and ask us about the use of these funds. They can engage us, and we can have meaningful conversations about how to address any number of public health crises that intersect the opioid epidemic as well. So I would favor not being too restrictive in some of our wording or guidance, but I would strongly favor, of course, being transparent about use of funds. And if people have questions, and if there really are some crises that need to be solved, and certainly those that intersect with the opioid epidemic, that we talk about it as a group, and we talk about what's best for the state and certainly the community, and take a look at it. So, but thank you all for bringing up those questions.
I'm going to add one thing. Thank you, everybody, for your comments. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being out there throughout the epidemic, the pandemic, before the pandemic, this epidemic. We are, I want to also just add that it's our 10th year anniversary right now of the Governor's Overdose Task Force, right? That's important. That's like a very big deal. And people say to me, I remember where I was. Well, I was doing outreach, and I was bringing people to treatment at that time. And they were in the back seat of my car, and I was trying to bring people to treatment. So, and I know I worked alongside of a lot of the folks that are in the community, alongside of all of you here in the Opioid Settlement Committee. But I want to say that nationally, to Dr. Chan's point, nationally, it doesn't always feel great, but these processes that you all, Opioid Settlement Committee, the community, through the task force, through some of our treatment providers, some of our clinical providers, they are in place. It's not a perfect system. It's never going to be perfect, but I want to reiterate that transparency, communication, and following the process is the goal of this committee, and that's what you have all said loud and clear, and the community has said from the beginning of the Opioid Settlement Committee coming into play. And it all really stems from this amazing infrastructure that we already had here in Rhode Island. And then nationally, people come to us, Brandon, to me, to Dr. Chan, to Director LeClaire, to people that are in some of these state agencies asking for guidance all the time. So I just want to kind of just put that out there and say it is not perfect, but I just want to say that the conversations, the transparency, and following the process is what the goal is from my seat where I sit. And so that's kind of what I do all day, every day. So thank you, everybody. And thank you, community, for coming out today and giving us some public comment.
Sandy, do you have a second comment?
It's just
Yes.
a follow-up. I did not draw the conclusion from the buckets of money that meant that it wasn't just me. Because in my mind, the bucket could potentially be manipulated to solve for those things. So I'm really glad that you pointed that out, but that is my concern still. I didn't draw that conclusion. I just thought, well, they'll go after this piece of those pies.
That is helpful. I would say, thank you, Sandy. I'd say two things. We talked before about how any shift in those percentages by bucket would need to come through this committee so that we're all benefited towards. And then I think to go back to the earlier conversation as well, that the legal agreements dictate what is allowable uses that have to be spent for opioid abatement is the language that is used. And I know the Attorney General has said that publicly as well. So that's another layer of accountability that sits in and outside this room, I would say, is the monitoring of the use of the funds for those purposes under the terms of the agreement. Not to put you on the spot.
No,
Julia,
not at
but
all.
Hopefully that is, you feel that way or that is correct.
No, that is correct. All of the, and I'll just say, there are a number of settlement agreements, they all have slightly different language, but all of them do require that the funds be used for abatement purposes. So that's absolutely right.
Yes, Julie.
So I think, this conversation is important to be having right now because the governor's office is building the governor's budget right now. And so it may be useful to send a memo to the governor's office indicating the feedback we've received and the concern, because I understand we're in tough financial times right now. And so, I can understand, looking at a pot of money and saying, okay, this can fill that role. But what we're saying is, no, hold on a second. You have to be a little more deliberate about that. And we're asking that, you not touch, or, we're saying that this is the position that we're taking on behalf of the community groups in accordance with the settlement agreement. So maybe this is the right time to just make that statement, just so that there can be transparency, because I think the secretaries, that their role, their advocacy is very important, but it's ultimately the governor's office that's building this budget. And so, I think that's where we need to focus the communications, so.
That's a great idea. I'm happy to draft that memo on behalf of the committee and circulate. Yeah, thank you for that idea. Great. Okay, what I might do is move us along to the next slide. So this is a process I keep forgetting about and want to introduce more often, just to get a temperature check from the committee on how we're feeling about moving forward with a motion to actually approve the guidance. We've heard from some committee members that they feel comfortable doing so. We could also put a motion forward to delay an actual vote until the next meeting, which is in January, to actually incorporate some of your recommendations and also feedback we've heard from the community. So I think those are the options in front of us right now. How are folks feeling? Maybe with like a show of thumbs, if you'd like to move forward with a vote to approve, maybe thumbs up, or if you'd like to vote to delay, or you'd like to introduce a motion to delay a formal vote until January, maybe thumbs down would be helpful. Yeah.
So we're not meeting again until January?
That's right. That's right.
Well,
So yes.
Before we get to a vote, I would just say I think it's important that we get something out there. So
kind of reflecting, I think, on Julie's comment about, yes.
I'll make a motion that we vote.
Okay. Can we get there's a motion on the table. Can I get a second? We have seconds. All right. So we're going to go ahead and move forward to vote on the guidance. I would say what I've heard is that the motion is to approve the guidance with some changes, which I can summarize, to explicitly reference the settlement agreement, clarify that it should no way usurp or conflict with the terms of the agreement. And we heard from members of the committee or members of the public to encourage some of the language to be more expansive as well, so we could draft that and recirculate. But that would be, I think, what we would vote on today is the guidance as is with those changes.
Can we put
Can we
on
vote,
record what those
can we vote on
changes?
it that way?
I don't know.
We can't.
No, okay, we
I
have to
think,
vote
yeah,
as is.
we can't vote on something that's not. in
That's
We'd have to have the
front of us.
language.
So we would
Can
have
we
to.
move this to later on? Can someone draft some language quick?
The problem with that is that if we're not meeting till January, you wouldn't be in a position to give that update to the governor's office and say, you know, this has been voted on by the committee. So, I mean, we could put our heads together on some language to amend the proposal now. But,
And as
no,
well, it's, guidance is never final, right? So I suppose the other option would be to vote on the guidance as is written with a commitment to revisit and vote on a revision, potentially. That would be an option.
Yeah,
I would,
supplantation.
better
Vote on
to,
the guidance.
don't let perfect be the enemy of good. That's what I would say.
Right, right. And you'd have my commitment that we could revisit this in January with possible revisions that you could vote on.
Sounds good.
Great. Okay, so let's move forward with a vote because we have the motion on the table. All in favor of approving the guidance in front of you with a commitment to revisit in January? Say aye.
Can everybody just
Yeah.
put their hands up for a minute, just so that we get the vote? Because if it's fast, it's unanimous.
Unanimous,
Okay,
great.
thank
The
you.
motion passes unanimously. Thank you all. Excellent. Okay. And thank you for your help as I navigate Robert's rules. Okay. So the next piece on the agenda is an update from the Attorney General's office on a new settlement that is forthcoming. So I'll turn it over to Julia Harvey to give an update on behalf of the Attorney General.
Great, thank you, Brandon. Should I stay here or should I go, where do you want me to
Wherever you feel
present?
the most comfortable. Yeah.
I'll stay here because I'm near a microphone and then everybody can
Yeah.
hear me. So it's great to see you all again. As Brandon said, I'm from the Office of the Attorney General. I actually sit within our healthcare unit. And so I help support some of the work on the opioid settlements. And so just wanted to come today to give a brief update on one of the many settlements that Rhode Island has entered into, which is the Purdue settlement. Just a little bit of, I'll give a little bit of background just to sort of orient folks to where we are. We have a number of settlements with many different manufacturers and distributors and other folks who were involved in sort of perpetuating the opioid epidemic in this state and others. And the Purdue settlement now, Rhode Island has committed to entering into the settlement along with every other state in the country. And also as of last month, every city and town has also signed on, in the state of Rhode Island has also signed on to the settlement. By way of background, it's been sort of a long road with Purdue. We entered into a settlement as part of Purdue Pharma's bankruptcy that they entered into in 2019. Rhode Island and the other states also entered into a settlement as part of that process, and it was ultimately overturned by the Supreme Court. So that happened last year in 2024. Since then, a new settlement has been negotiated as part of, again, this bankruptcy process. And as I said, the states have signed on. Under this settlement, Rhode Island is expected to receive $27 million. So this makes it one of the largest settlements that the state is receiving across all of our opioid settlements. And this, just like every other settlement or most of the settlements, it will be divided between the state and the cities and towns, where 80% of the funds will go to the state and 20% will go to the cities and towns. This is one thing that's actually unique about Rhode Island is we will actually receive all of the funds in the first year of the settlement. So we will not receive it over many, many years, which is actually an advantage to the state. So we're very pleased about that. And I'll just say in terms of process, we're still in the bankruptcy process. So the bankruptcy plan has there's a court date where that will be finalized, we expect. I believe that's November 10th, so coming up soon. And then after that, there are some sort of administrative steps that we have to go through to make sure that the funds can flow. And at that point, we will learn when we can expect the funds to actually be received by the state. But right now, we're expecting those funds will come in the next year. And certainly, of course, as we learn more with more finality about when that will be, we will communicate that to EOHHS and, yeah, of course, the public as well. So that is the update that I have on Purdue, but of course, if it's appropriate, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yes, we have some time actually built in for discussion on this piece. I will say our thought for the committee is to return to this issue in January to talk more broadly about sustainability and some committee's input on how we might manage these funds, especially given that they're all coming up front, which is different than the current agreements, which have this decay. So that is the thought, but we do have some time right now. Regina LaBelle, the next presenter, is coming at 2:15, so we actually do have some time to ask questions to Julia and discussion on these funds. Director, the floor is yours.
Julia, thank you. Are there any restrictions, guidelines, targets for either the spending on the money or the implementation of the services?
Great question. So I think I actually mentioned earlier, all of the settlements do have terms about how appropriate uses of the funds, which are, they must be used for abatement. And there is a section of the settlement agreement which will be publicly available, which will delineate that in sort of detail, but as with the other settlement agreements, it will be generally for abatement purposes. So we don't expect that there will be, for example, any different restrictions on the funds than any of the other settlements that we've seen to date.
And is it up to us to determine the spend rate of that amount?
Yeah, so I'll defer to the EOHHS team on specifically how those decisions will be made, but my understanding is exactly that it will be up to the OSAC to be able to review and make determinations about how those funds will be allocated. Anything?
Yeah, so I'll let Brandon bring us into that part of the discussion. I think it's more towards the end, but since we have time, maybe we'll talk about it now.
Yeah.
We EOHHS, because we staff the opioid settlement committee and we do a lot of the work in the background. Brandon as our chair, as our non-voting member, sort of the neutral person, we do a lot of agenda planning and thinking about topics based on what you all talk about, and this is a great topic. We heard about this before. So what we were anticipating is to give us a little time, since according to the AG's office, I had reached out to Adi and she explained that it's going to take a while before Purdue comes in, and that would be one of the topics to discuss in January, and so that we can come together with some kind of plan on how the money will come in. Is it going to be like fully front loaded? We'll have more details hopefully by then, and then come to you all to think about sustainability, forecasting and stuff like that. And we are going to hopefully have some economic professionals, experts to help us with that, because I will not claim to be one. And I think that, some of us might have some background in it, but I think it's agreed, in our, with the AG's office and also in our planning committee, that we're going to be looking into that. And we're so lucky to have a chair that seems to have a lot of resources there at Brown University.
Access to resources, yeah. So that is the thought, is to come to you also with some analysis of what the current spend rate typically has been, some forecasts around what that might start to look like, and how we could use this Purdue settlement in different ways. So actually, I think quite a few options on the table for this committee to consider based on what you're saying, Julia. Yeah, it can be, the current agreement does decay. The Purdue settlement could be used to flatten that decay. It could be used for rainy day funds. There could be lots of options, but we thought that it would be best to have that discussion once you have a little bit more understanding of the current spend rate, the carry forwards, the forecasts, and some maybe input from some health economists and other advisors. So that's the thought for January. Yes, Dr. McAdoo.
Yeah, just one quick clarifying question, just so that we can kind of start thinking about this in advance of January.
Yes.
I'm curious if you could clarify whether it's allowable, and again, we'll make actual decisions and talk about in much greater depth in January, but I just wanted to understand whether it's allowable for these funds, or a portion of these funds, to go into an interest-bearing account, which could allow it to not necessarily just kind of flat decay.
Yeah, Kathy and I have had some discussions about that. We do not know. to be quite frank. I'm not sure, Julia, if you have more insights into whether that mechanism would be allowable, but basically an endowment type approach.
I think it's an important question that is worth exploring. I don't have an answer as we sit here, and I would just say that it is a question worth exploring, and I think it may turn in part on how it's set up, right? I think that, it would just be one thing we would just want to be conscious of is making sure that, as interest is accrued, how does that intersect with our obligations under the settlement, and does it meet up with those obligations? So that's the only thing that I would say about that.
Right. So if it is possible to maybe get some greater clarifications on that point in advance of January.
And I think that that's the good thing about not meeting until January, unless you all want to meet before that, because that's at the end. We already kind of came, I think everybody agreed, but is to give some time to explore those things, because again, I'm not an economist. I'm not an attorney either. So, but we do have some attorneys here, but I'm sure that they don't want to just, give legal advice all the time while it's sitting on the opioid settlement committee. But to really look into those kind of things and have some solid answers, possibly somebody to talk to us, and to answer some of these questions that we are not experts in.
Yeah. What we do know from a prior presentation, I think it was Kristen Pendergrass, who said that at least one state is doing an endowment mechanism, I think New Mexico. But in other states, it is not allowable under the terms of the agreement. So it depends on the specific language, I think.
And it's possible that's because of some states have, executed statutes, or their language is different in their MOU. So that might be possible. Yeah.
Right. Yes, Director.
Yeah, Julia, is a copy of that settlement public information now? Is that still being?
That's a great question. Let me look into that and get back to you.
Because if we have the language, it may answer some of the questions we have to know whether the guardrails.
What the allowable uses are. Yeah, that's a fair question.
The MOUs are all available on the OSAC website. And then all of the settlements are also publicly available between the actual distributors or manufacturers in the state.
Yes, and the only question that I don't know is certainly it will be made available. I just don't know yet if it is public on the website like the other settlements are. So I will definitely look into that.
The Purdue settlement.
The Purdue settlement.
Purdue is not, but all of the other ones,
Yes,
like
right.
the Exhibit E.
Yeah, I was looking specifically at the Purdue one. Yeah, thank you.
And I think it's important just to remind everybody, for the newer members of the settlement committee, and I know we did a quick orientation, but it's always good. And again, we have some time too. So just a reminder that there is an EOHHS settlement page. And if you ever see anything on there, we here at EOHHS kind of manage it, and you see something's missing or you see a mistake or something, please let us know. And we're always happy to do that. We work very closely with Julia, and she checks on the revenue. I think that's what it is, the opioid payments, and we try to update that on a regular basis. She reaches out and talks to Michelle. So if there's anything on there that you have a question you don't see, and you had a question you can't find it, just reach out to myself. There's also the OHHS settlement email address, or Sil is always here to help you all to navigate that. We also on Prevent Overdose RI have a settlement page that's really for the general public. Like it's because it's been around for so long. That will also link you back to some of those resources as well.
Yes.
And if I may, Dr.
Please
do. Dr. Chan, if I remember 4 or 5 meetings back about sustainability, you spoke about how we could set up a process to have money going forward. If you could bring that up later on as we move into January, because at the time, I always wanted to make sure the money went right to where it needed to be. This is something new that's coming in. That's available right away, so that we can do different things with this money versus the money that's in front of us. So that still goes out, still go there. And I remember you said something on that, so something to think about in January.
That's exactly right, Rep. Hall. That's the goal for January. And I think there's 2 pieces here I would add. The context, which we'll hear from Regina Lavelle soon, about significant federal changes that we will need to mitigate. And so that's a context. And then also, I think we need to hear from members of the public as well on this issue about how to use this, as you're saying, additional 27 million. And that's super important, right? Everything that we voted on so far is what's
Separate and apart.
separate. And so this 27 million is in addition to the 10 million or so that was voted on and approved. Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
And we do have a process in place, and we also, and that's something to think about too, is we'll, either way, the Governor's Overdose Task Force and the work groups and all that, we're still gonna use our process because it is there, and it's a good process, but we've heard in the past that we need to expand that process. So that's also the things to think about too, is how can we expand that process and maybe get more voices and hear from more people. Maybe it's a survey, right? I find that the surveys have been a little better because I talk a lot, but I always say not everybody does. And sometimes that person that is not as vocal has some really amazing ideas that we're not hearing.
Okay. Other questions or comments from the committee? Yes, Rachel.
Point of clarification,
Yes.
the 27 million is the whole settlement, so this group would only be voting on like 21 change.
That's a fantastic clarification. That's exactly right. Yeah.
We've got a little bit of time, and so I don't want to vamp. What I might do is move us to the second public comment now. We were going to do that at the end of the meeting, and then we'll have Regina LaBelle join us. If you still just let me know as soon as she's on Zoom or Teams, and we can then move to her presentation. So why don't we do that? We'll open it up for another round of public comment. Members of the public, feel free to comment on the discussion we just had around Purdue or any other topic that's on your mind. Yes, Linda, thanks for joining us. The floor is yours.
I have two, so I'll try to be quick. And I'm sorry, I'm really naive to this particular piece here. So the percentages for 27, does the 27 million fall under that category of percentages? Because it's coming in 27 and would probably be implemented during that budget year.
We will have a whole process for community engagement. We'll follow a whole new process, even if it comes in and I'll let Michelle, you can add to this, because that's our finance person. Even if it comes,
it's easier this way.
Even if it comes in 27, it likely wouldn't get put in the budget until 28. Am I wrong on that, Michelle? What's the process?
No, and I wanted to clarify, because I know the slide said, Julia, it said like the coming year, and I know you had mentioned like next year. So when we say, let's just clarify, calendar year or fiscal year, because our fiscal year ends in June, and then we have calendar year all of 26, from January to December.
So we don't, so to just to that point, Michelle, within the coming calendar year is when we expect to receive it. We don't have more clarity right now on which calendar year that will be in, but as Kathy said, it will not impact the allocations that have already been made. It'll be totally separate.
Yeah, we'll do a whole, it'll be the whole process again, because it's an additional amount of money.
Allocations will be different.
It'll be-
Percentage of allocation will be different.
That's right, Linda. Yeah, yes.
Thank you.
Based on a process, feedback, comment, and then another vote at this body.
And
Yeah.
to just clarify, I think that what we're going to talk about in January is about how to, we're going to have experts, because I don't want to be the expert of like some of the feedback, Dr. Chan and Rep. Hull just said it, is how can we maybe stretch that money? Because the money goes down over years, right? So that's just an example of what might be talked about in this committee. That's kind of what the committee has been saying, is how do we really make sure that we are getting community input, following the process, transparency, and also how do we make this last longer? Because we know that it's important to have enough funding for our programs that exist. And then we look at maybe if there's something like, you know what I mean? So it will be the same pillars, but the percentages will change, but it also may change, like we don't know how the money's coming in. If the money came in, the whole 27 million or the 21 million for the state, a decision may be made that we're going to do an endowment, do an investment, something. That's what we're going to talk about in January. But it could be, and also to stretch that money as far as possible. Sustainability is the key.
Thank you. And because you're not going to have a meeting until January, I'm going to add two quickies. One is, and we've had the conversation before, it's my feeling, and not just my feeling, several people in the field, providers in the field, feel that the process of getting community input almost wholly, which was what was given to us before, from the governor's overdose task force or overdose prevention task force. I can't remember what it is anymore.
Overdose
I was on it in the
now.
beginning. It's been too long. That it isn't inclusive enough. I feel like my voice gets heard here because I do this, but I feel like as a group, and many of us feel that as a group of treatment providers and recovery providers, our voices haven't been heard as clearly. They just haven't. And so I'm hoping, and if you want to ask, doesn't have to be me, but ask us for even suggestions on how we can be heard in a way that is clear and much like we've done with the overdose prevention task force groups, and so it comes through clearly. And then the last thing is, just since you're not meeting again until January, I want to make clear, as you're thinking about how much goes towards sustainability, how much goes to an endowment. People have been talking about putting it towards some research like this money. The money is still needed to provide care on the street, and it's critical. It's absolutely critical. And I'm happy to send you a link if you have an interest. There's an article by Tom McClellan and Nora Volko. And some of you might know their names. They're like international experts in opioid use disorder. NIDA, NIH, all of that. But it's about the secondary and tertiary effects of multiple overdoses, because we don't have a way yet to fully measure non-fatal overdose. Okay, we know how many people died and less have died, and that's a wonderful thing. But what we're seeing, and what many people are seeing in all different areas of care, is that there's people that have had multiple overdoses, and that's great that they're not dying. We don't want them to be fatal. But what happens if your brain doesn't have oxygen 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes, 5 times in the last year, your cognition, your brain changes. And there's secondary and tertiary effects that impact all of us, taxpayer dollars, everything. And we're seeing that now in individuals that we have in long-term care. So I'm happy to send the information, because you need to know this. You need to hear it when you're making decisions about what these percentages are. And then you make the decisions on the percentages. But what has happened for many of us is that we get the criteria, once the percentage goes to the specific state agency, the criteria for the RFPs exclude many of us much of the time. We just we're not eligible because of X, Y, or Z. And so, again, I'm just asking you to hear this. And I thank you for the time.
Anyone on Zoom still?
Regina.
Great, perfect. Okay. Not hearing any more public comment, folks. We can move to our next presentation. Hi, Regina. It's Brandon. Are you there?
Hi, I'm here. Nice to see you.
Great to hear you. I don't think we can see you, but we can see the slides.
Okay.
So I'll introduce you, and then we'll get going with your presentation. So I asked Regina Lavelle, who's a colleague and friend at Georgetown, to present the committee on some of the possible federal impacts, federal changes, and how they may impact the population affected by substance use and substance use disorder in Rhode Island, and she kindly accepted. She's a professor of addiction policy at Georgetown University. She also founded and directs the Masters of Science in Addiction Policy and Practice at Georgetown. In addition to her academic role, she's a distinguished scholar and director of the Center on Addiction Policy at the O'Neill Institute for National and Global Health Law at Georgetown Law. In addition, she has an extensive background in public service, having served at both the local and federal levels of government. In the Biden administration, she was appointed acting director of the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy, where she oversaw the development and administration of drug policy priorities. So she's going to speak for about 15 minutes, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions from members of the committee. So whenever you're ready, Regina, take it away.
Great. Thanks so much. And it's nice to see all of you. Thanks so much for all the work you do in your community to make Rhode Island a safer place. And the most important thing about my background is that I grew up right over the border in Connecticut, in Killingly, Connecticut. Right near Foster and Gloucester, for those of you who used to listen to Salty Brine. So I can't see my slides though. I don't know if there's a way to do that on Teams. I'm not that familiar with Teams. So I'm just going to start.
Yeah, we can see them, Regina, and just let us know when you'd like to forward.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, that's all right. Teams is always tricky for me. So let me get to my slides and I will, so basically what I want to talk about today, and if we can go to my third slide. I don't have any conflicts. I want to talk about first, the changes that have been made. I think there's a lot of noise. This is a very fast moving environment we're in, as you know. And what I want to do first is kind of do the setup of what's been proposed, what Congress is doing, and what the current situation is on the ground. So first, if you could go to what I think my first slide is what's been proposed in the president's budget. Is that what's showing now? Because again, I can't see it.
Yeah.
One more.
Okay, thanks. Thanks. So, so what's been proposed in the president's budget is a very probably the most dramatic change to HHS that we've seen in some time. And the idea that the president had and RFK Jr. was to revise HHS so that it basically to streamline it, to get rid of a lot of the agency divisions. So currently, most of the funding, the grant funding, comes from SAMHSA. And then a lot of the on-the-ground work, the epidemiological work and data collection is done with CDC. So what the president's proposed budget was, and I apologize because I really need to see my slides, so I'm going to try to find what I sent you, and then I will begin again. Sorry.
Sorry about that, Regina. Take your time.
No, it's all right. Actually, could you just email them to me could someone just email them to me so that I have them kind of memorized, but not entirely.
I'll email you the entire deck here.
Great. Okay.
It's a big file.
Okay.
Works. Oh, that is too large. I have to send you a PDF. Hang on a second. There we go.
Okay.
So I'm sending you a PDF, and your slides start around slide 23.
Okay.
Yes, we're at slide 23. It says funding cuts in proposed fiscal year 26 budget.
Okay, hold on just a second.
Right. Did you receive my email?
I just got it. Yeah.
Great.
Okay. So, so the funding cuts in the president's budget included a cut of about $500 million to these combined, the block grants, the state opioid response grant, and the mental health block grant. The idea that he had was to move it all into the behavioral health innovation block grant and then reduce it by about 500 million. Now, the reason I bring this up is because while it was not adopted by the House and the Senate, and I will explain that in a minute, I think it's important to look at what the future might hold and where the administration is thinking what we should be doing about the Substance Use and Mental Health Services Administration budget. Next slide, please. So the other significant part for you all to be aware of is that the president's budget called for eliminating the programs of regional and national significance. Those are smaller grants that are very specific. So for example, the STOP Act is the only grant that goes to prevent underage drinking. The first responder training grant did receive some notice because it would have eliminated funding for naloxone distribution to first responders nationwide. So again, those were considered by the House and the Senate. And next slide, I'll show you what the Senate has done and then what the House has done so far. So again, we're in a government shutdown. We don't have an FY26 budget yet, but the Senate and the House have worked on their appropriations bills. They rejected the president's proposed combination of these three grants, the SOR grant, the block grant, and the Senate rejected getting rid of the programs of regional and national significance. They level funded them, which is about what we can hope for at this time. They also funded in CDC the Overdose Data to Action grant program, which really helps states be better prepared for basically doing the data collection that they need to evaluate overdose deaths, et cetera. The Drug Abuse Warning Network is a data collection system in hospital emergency rooms. It did receive funding in the Senate. It is not without its faults, but it is one of the only data systems that we have for emergency departments nationwide. The Senate bill did not include the administration's reorg of HHS. Next slide, please. So the House appropriations bill did much the same with a couple changes. First, the programs of regional and national significance, they did eliminate this one grant, which is for screening, brief intervention, and referral to treatment, and a few other treatment for homeless, minority AIDS, and peer support technical assistance. They also eliminated the Interagency Coordinating Committee on the Prevention of Underage Drinking. I'm not really sure what that was about, but that was in the House bill. And they, in the House and the Senate, said that they're going to leave the reorganization of HHS up to the committees that do the authorizing, not the appropriations committee. So the appropriators are the ones that put the money forward. The authorizers are the ones that do the policy work. Next slide, please. And next. So again, I want to set the stage for what the president has proposed. And one of the significant pieces that the president proposed was creating the Administration for a Healthy America. Now, the Administration for a Healthy America is comprised of the agencies that are included here. So basically, the Substance Use and Mental Health Services Administration, HRSA, and these other agencies would all be folded together into AHA. There are some who believe that this has pretty much already happened without congressional approval. So SAMHSA, which is the primary funder of grants for substance use issues, it is down about 50% right now in terms of staffing. And a lot of the staff there that do legislative affairs or other programmatic work, they have been subject to reduction in force. And so basically, SAMHSA does still exist, but a lot of the day-to-day activities that it does, legislative affairs, the director's office, et cetera, have been combined with the Health Resources and Services Administration. So that is supposed to be something, if AHA were to exist, that's something that the authorizing committees in the House and Senate are supposed to do, but it may be happening just by default at this time. Next slide, please. Another important piece of reorg that has not happened yet, but was proposed by the president, is taking the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, the National Institute on Drug Abuse, and the National Institutes of Mental Health, again, combining all three of those into the National Institute of Behavioral Health. That is not in the Senate or the House budgets, but the president has proposed it. These agencies are being subject to reductions in force. Their grants are still going out or have gone out before the shutdown, but that National Institute of Behavioral Health does not yet exist. Next slide, please. One piece that I think is really important is the National Center on Health Statistics is the center that tracks all the mortality data and other vital statistics for the US government. It is within the Center for Disease Control and Prevention at this time. However, the president's budget proposed to move it to a new HHS Office of Strategy and put it right under the secretary. This hasn't happened yet. Last week, when we talked about RIFs occurring, reductions in force occurring during COVID, during the shutdown, there were people from this center that were initially subject to reductions in force under the closure. However, that was, they said they made a mistake. Those people are not RIFed at this time. Next slide, please. So I want to talk about the policy changes. As we look at, we can kind of figure what the strategy is. The strategy is really, I think, under the administration, is to centralize a lot of these agencies. And the individuals who work in the agencies are kind of seen as people who can work across the country or in other areas of government. I know that people in the public health service have been, who are, were very instrumental in working on substance use issues, have been moved out of the Washington, D.C. office and moved to work on other priorities of HHS. So there's a lot of, a lot of reductions in force that are going on. And the people who are there are being moved to different positions. I think so that's really the strategy. From a policy standpoint, next slide, please. I think it's really important for the work that you do to understand the changes that will occur, that could occur under the Medicaid community engagement requirements. Now, the community engagement requirements are part of the One Big Beautiful Bill that's now an act that was passed earlier this year. The community engagement requirements, which include work requirements, they don't take effect until January of 2027. Okay, but the administration, HHS, has to clarify the rules about who qualifies for exceptions to those community engagement requirements. That rule, which is not subject to public comment, is due out in June of next year. So we'll know in June of next year if what is meant by someone with a substance use disorder who qualifies for an exception to the work requirement because they're considered medically frail. Now, medically frail is a legal term that's contained in other acts. So what this means is there are a couple different exceptions. So if someone is an individual in treatment at a drug addiction or alcohol treatment program at a private nonprofit organization, depending on the details that are put out in June of 26, those individuals can be exempt from the work requirements or community engagement requirements that are going to kick in. There's also an exception to the work requirement if the person is incarcerated or upon reentry for a specific time. While June of 26, there's a couple dates to keep in mind. June of 26 is when the rule comes out to say what we mean by an exception. December of 26 is when the eligibility determination is supposed to start. So those states like Rhode Island have to have that eligibility determination has to kick in January. They have to finish that by December of 26. But what's happening right now is there are restrictions that are being placed on states to raise revenue, and that can cause some states already to decrease care. The other issue that I think is important to raise in terms of funding is the Rural Health Fund. Now, I don't know in a state, I'm assuming that Rhode Island qualifies, some of your facilities will qualify for that Rural Health Fund. And my understanding is that opioid treatment programs are eligible under that Rural Health Fund. States have until November 5th to apply for part of that fund. It's $25 billion that's supposed to go to states. And the purpose of that is to keep rural hospitals from shuttering. But there are several other provisions contained in that. CMS will make those determinations. Next slide, please. So one of the other issues that I want to raise is an executive order that the president issued in July of this year, ending crime and disorder on America's streets. The executive order really has two parts. One is about housing and homelessness and involuntary commitment, mandatory treatment. The other piece of this is about harm reduction and harm reduction services. Now, the executive order itself was clarified by SAMHSA's, next slide, please. The next slide shows SAMHSA's Dear Colleague letter that came out just a week after. A couple things to keep in mind about this. When that Dear Colleague letter was put out, it says very clearly that drug testing strips that test xylazine or fentanyl or other adulterants are not considered harm reduction supplies that would be subject to prohibition of federal funds. The second thing that they said in this Dear Colleague letter is that opioid overdose reversal medications, including naloxone, that is not considered harm reduction. Now, states are now kind of, and I have spoken with several states now, they're kind of struggling with whether or not harm reduction and the distribution of syringes at syringe services programs is prohibited by this SAMHSA Dear Colleague letter and subsequent guidance. I think those are topics of discussion that attorneys and states are going to have to decide. I think that an argument can be made that syringe services programs are not prohibited for funding for everything but the syringes. But again, that's something that states are going to have to decide. And what's most important is this only applies to federal funds. It doesn't apply across the board. So the question for states is, how do you define these strategies to reach people who are most at risk of overdose, who need help with substance use disorder services, who may not otherwise receive them? And my final slide is just, next slide, please, is just my contact information if I can be of any assistance. And with that, I will turn it back over.
Thank you so much, Regina. That was a very sobering but important set of information for the committee to consider. I'll open it up for questions from the committee. I actually have a few, Regina, but I'll wait and hold mine until the committee members have a chance to ask any questions. Dr. Chan, take it away.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Regina. My name is Phil Chan. I'm a physician and part of a scientist here. My main field of study has been HIV. I have one comment, one question. I also want to acknowledge that the federal government has proposed tremendous cuts to the field of HIV as well. So over $1 billion from the CDC for HIV prevention, cuts to Ryan White, which is the main HIV safety net care provider in the country, minority AIDS funds, HOPWA, the housing opportunities for people living with HIV, and they proposed over $1 billion cuts to the NIH in general, much of that which is to HIV. So I am reassured that at least the Senate is stepping up a little bit and at least suggesting level funding, which I agree with you is kind of the best we can hope for at this time. I'm curious though about your comment and in your opinion where all this is going, understanding that none of us can fully predict it. But to your point, a lot of the federal administration seems to be doing a lot of this already, despite Congress. And I'm just curious what your thoughts are on how this funding is going to play out, in your opinion. Is this just political posturing? Is the Senate, do you think, going to win back some of these level-funded budgetary items? What are your thoughts on where this is going? And what are your thoughts on what is going to happen when Congress passes these budgets in disagreement with the White House?
Yeah, great questions. I think a couple things. One is, you've got some real leaders in the Senate with White House and who understand the issue, what's at stake, and they're on influential committees that can help you. I think the more heat the Senate and the House feels, and I don't mean political heat from having a bad story in whatever newspaper. I mean their constituents. I just heard something today that the payment portal is down for SAMHSA grants so that, state, and this was the state of Illinois mentioned this, the payment portal is down for SAMHSA to get some of its grant payments out the door. On the short-term issue of shutdown effects, Congress has to hear it. They have to see the faces. They have to hear the stories and know that these are their constituents. That's one piece. And that's, I think, exactly why couldn't, in the Senate and the House budgets, they couldn't with a straight face just get rid of all these grant programs or cut them in the ways that they were supposed to be cut. As far as I have heard that if they do come to the table, that we are likely to get another full year continuing resolution. What I am concerned about with that is that it doesn't give Congress, Congress has the ability to hold the administration accountable for spending funds it's appropriated, but if they pass another continuing resolution, that might weaken Congress's hand. And we haven't seen that backbone yet. perhaps, it's the end of the year, maybe early next year, as we get closer to the end of 2026, that will happen. But I think the most important thing is that communities not give up on their members, and that they give them the evidence that they need to show the real world impacts of these issues.
Thanks, Regina.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yes, Julie.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Professor, for sharing with us your thoughts and slides. I just had a question about what you mean on the policy changes, the restrictions placed on states to raise revenue. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so the states are allowed to charge certain fund money to hospitals, et cetera, to fund some of the Medicaid services, and those have been restricted under the One Big Beautiful Act. That's been restricted, and I can't remember if I have on that slide. I might have a link, but there's information on that. The MACPAC, which is a Medicaid group, has a lot of really great information on that. And I have colleagues at Georgetown's Center on Children that have done quite a bit of work on that, on the impact of the OBBA to collect funds from various entities in a state.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? I actually do have one question, Regina. Right before you joined, we were talking about a new settlement that's coming, the Purdue Agreement, which is about $27 million in total that will be added to our agreement. And so I suppose the question is, have you seen good examples, or do you have resources for the committee on ways in which other jurisdictions might be thinking about using settlement dollars to mitigate or buffer in some way some of these federal changes, but specifically maybe around Medicaid restrictions?
Yeah, this is a big topic of discussion. Some states, and I don't know Rhode Island's law well enough, some states are restricted from supplanting existing programs, using the opioid litigation funds to supplant existing programs. So is that the topic of the day?
Yeah, that's the topic of the day.
And, at first I was like, no, we shouldn't do that. But, I mean, if what we think will happen, it's pretty dire. So as far as good examples, the best place to look for those resources, the National Association of State Health Policy, NASHP. They have an ongoing monthly meeting. Some of you may already attend that, where people share what they're doing. But I think given there's no one model because states are so different in how they're spending funds. But the most important thing is that state legislators don't. It's one thing to supplant. It's another thing if a state legislature has appropriations authority over the opioid litigation funds to have it be spent on things that are not related to substance use or opioid overdose deaths.
Other questions? Actually, I have one more then for you, Regina. Sorry to put you on the spot. With the Medicaid work requirements, I was talking with someone at SAMHSA, who many in the room may know, that say even people with substance use disorder are exempt from the requirement, that there would still likely need to be I think you have that in the slide, like an eligibility determination of exemption every 6 months. And there's concern that that is going to really catch people and they'll effectively lose their Medicaid because of that additional red tape to redetermine their eligibility, even if they have an exemption. Is that correct in your view?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think about this all the time with, we spent all this time making sure that people, we've got the 1115 waivers for people who are incarcerated. That's being implemented in many states. People who are incarcerated may not have stable housing. They may have a substance use disorder. When they get out, they're going to have to recertify. If you have a chronic substance use disorder, it's same thing. You may have unstable housing. I also found in the states, I think it was Arkansas definitely, and then I believe Georgia, that it cost more to implement those certification programs for work requirements than they actually saved. So I think for our population, we should be very concerned about that. But that's where that June rule will be important when that comes out, because that will say who qualifies. I have lots of questions about it. Does it mean that someone has to be in a private treatment facility? What about the people who go to AA meetings? They have a substance use disorder. Are they not qualified for this exception because they will have a harder time proving it? So absolutely, every 6 months doesn't sound like a lot, but it could be very problematic. Legal Action Center has put out some guidance for states on how to do those certifications so that they might not be as onerous. Obviously, we want people to work. It is important for people to have employment, particularly in recovery and sustaining their recovery. But we shouldn't make it so onerous that they can't fulfill those requirements. So Legal Action Center has kind of thread that needle for states to consider, and they have that on their website that I think would be a good guide for states.
Great, I can circulate that. Yeah, Kathy?
Thank you so much, Regina. I'm a big fan. I can see you, but you can't see me. I don't know if you can see me, but I'm here. I'm a big fan of Regina. I kind of follow her around at all the national conferences because I secretly want to be a lawyer and don't want to go back to school. But anyway, one of the things, just so everybody knows, if you're not familiar, there was an executive order signed by Governor McKee, which created a federal advisory committee that is actually, there was a report being drafted now that is due at the end of the month. So that actually says, and I want everybody to know that, because if you don't know about it, we'll make sure we'll follow up with some information on it so that you all have access to it. We have sent it out in our newsletters for the task force. We've sent it out and it's on the websites and stuff to really get the word out there because we have been very proactive. And I want to say that with that executive order, that was very, very important. But we can never know enough because there's a lot of unanswered questions. That's why we asked you to join us. And I want to thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We have time maybe for one more question from the committee. Great. Okay, well, thanks again, Regina, for these resources.
Okay.
For sharing your insights today, and hope to see you soon.
Great. Thank you. Bye,
care.
everybody.
Bye.
Thank you again.
Okay, so I'll move us maybe to slide 36 and just proceed to wrap up this afternoon, folks. Do you have a question, Chief? Okay. So we wanted to spend just a moment talking about the calendar. We already hinted at this before. Just go forward. Still. Yes, these are out of order. Yeah. There we go. So as we talked about already, the plan was to meet in January. That is because we typically meet at the fourth Wednesday of each month, and that would put us the day before Thanksgiving and the day before Christmas. So the proposal is to not meet until January and then follow this schedule here. Unless, as Kathy said, unless the committee feels strongly about meeting between now and January, we could try to identify a different Wednesday that works. But this is the proposal on the table that we can get feedback on. I think the March meeting would be for the new members. I actually wanted to sort of put you on the spot, Kathy, if there will be an election of new members this year.
I haven't gotten that far, but I do know of one spot that I think is opened. There is going to be, I think there's one more transition. I believe, I have to double check the settlement agreement because it gives it very specifically. I believe that, and I know Dennis couldn't make it today, but I believe that Dennis's seat is going to be
that's right.
Shifting out because they tiered it by 2, 3, and 4 years. And I think he's going into the 4th year, but I have to double check on that.
That's right.
And I'll check on he actually represents experts. So I will check on that and we'll, here at EOHHS, we'll put that together too.
Thanks, Kathy. So that would be the thought, is that January is the discussion about sustainability and the Purdue settlement specifically. March would be the election of the new member or members. And then we move into the heavy summer schedule of preparing for the vote in August. So that's the thought. Any feedback from the committee on whether that sounds good? Whether you'd like to add another meeting? Thumbs up, yeah, maybe thumbs up. I don't think we need to vote on this formally, but just temperature check. Great. Okay, we'll plan for that then. The meetings will be in this room.
Yep.
Yep. Great.
Unless anybody is opposed to that. Has it been okay? I mean, we're going into a new year. We might as well talk about it now. Is everybody good with continuing to meet here? The sound has been good. Everybody on Zoom can hear us. I mean, on Teams, I think, yep, we have thumbs up. So it seems like the technology, the room, it seems to be going well, as long as everybody else is okay with that.
Okay.
Good.
Go forward. So we've done public comment already. Maybe I'll give one more opportunity. Great. Okay. So then I'll finally hand it over to Kathy to do a few more announcements, and then we'll adjourn the meeting.
And we might get out 5 minutes early. See that? I'll be quick. So I just wanted to let everybody know that the next Governor's Overdose Task Force is going to be in person in this room. It's November 12th. We're doing a strategic refresh. And I know that we ask a lot of you all to meet with us for 2 hours once a month, well, especially at this time of year. We're getting a break. If you can join, please do, because we want to hear from you, because this is about the strategic planning, and those are the pillars. Those are the strategies across all the pillars. So I want to invite you to join us, and it's going to be very interactive. As we speak right now, there are surveys that are going out across many of the work groups for the 4 main pillars. We're also looking at the indicators that you saw in our last meeting in August that Christina Schultz had shared. But we're going to be, sort of going into the calendar year 26 to 28 strategic plan, because we did it in 23. We had a lot of strategies, and I'm just saying, and I'm hoping that we can drill down into some of those, see if some are duplicative, if some, maybe they can just kind of married into something else and stuff like that. So that's the purpose of that. And I think I mentioned this earlier, and I was speaking to the community, and I'm always going to speak to the community just because that's who I am. But I want to say to all of you, some of you may have been newer here, some of you have been since the beginning. It is the 10th anniversary of the Governor's Overdose Task Force. And we are secretly in the back. We have amazing teams at BHTDH and RIDO who are pulling all the press releases. They're looking at like 10 years of knowledge. That's how much knowledge is here in our state. And we're secretly also trying to get some of our leaders from the beginning. Maybe we can get lucky and we can have some guests come join us. So please join us. And I like food, so I always try to have food. And maybe Stacy will make us some more cookies. I don't know, I haven't called her yet, but I will. Stacy Levin makes the best cookies ever. So anyway, so those are the 2 next meetings. The 10th anniversary, we haven't decided. It'll probably be here, but we're talking about maybe having it somewhere else. So if anybody knows of a space that has no cost and it would be great and have parking and it's accessible to buses, let me know, give me a call. We would be open to that, thinking about 75 at least people, maybe 100. That's all I have, thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. All right, next slide. So our next meeting will be January 28th. If you go to the next slide, I just wanted to put my email here. If you have any feedback for me on what we could do better in the new year, if you'd like to see the meetings run a different way or managed differently, please reach out to me. And that goes for members of the public as well. If you have suggestions on how to increase community engagement, please email me or Kathy. There's a general email as well that is on the website as well as another way to get in touch with us. So with that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded. All in favor of adjourning, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstained? Thanks, everyone. The meeting is adjourned. We'll see you in January. Take care.